He was called the Little Corporal by his enemies and the God of War by his admirers. Rising from the rugged island of Corsica to the throne of an empire, Napoleon Bonaparte did not just lead France, he remade the world in his image. But what was the secret to his meteoric rise? It wasn't just luck, and it wasn't just the chaos of the French Revolution. Napoleon was a psychological marvel, a man of contradictions who possessed a mind unlike any of his contemporaries. He was a mathematician, a lawgiver, a romantic, and a ruthless pragmatist all at once. Today, on Discover the World in 10, we are looking past the battlefield maps and the bicorn hat. We are dissecting the personality of the man who forced all of Europe to learn his name. From his legendary memory to his strange obsession with speed, here are the 10 traits that truly defined Napoleon Bonaparte. Long before he was a general, Napoleon was a math prodigy. As a student at the military academy in Brienne, he excelled in geometry and trigonometry while struggling with social graces and Latin. This mathematical foundation became the bedrock of his military success. Napoleon viewed the battlefield not as a place of glory, but as a giant geometric problem. He could calculate the trajectory of artillery fire, the speed of a marching column, and the supply needs of 100,000 men in his head with startling accuracy. While other generals relied on gut feelings, Napoleon relied on cold, hard numbers. He famously said, "The art of war is a simple art, all in execution. There is nothing vague about it." Napoleon possessed a rare psychological ability that he described as having drawers in his head. He could focus intensely on one subject, be it a new law for the civil code or a tactical maneuver, and then close that drawer and immediately focus on something entirely different without any mental residue. He could dictate 4 different letters to 4 different secretaries on 4 different topics simultaneously. This mental compartmentalization allowed him to manage an entire empire while fighting a war. He could sleep for 20 minutes in the middle of a battle and wake up with total clarity. His mind was an organized filing cabinet that never got cluttered, allowing him to process information at a speed that exhausted his advisors. Most conquerors are only interested in land. Napoleon was interested in everything. When he invaded Egypt in 1798, he didn't just bring soldiers, he brought 167 scientists, artists, and engineers. This trait redefined modern science. Because of Napoleon's curiosity, the Rosetta Stone was discovered, and the field of Egyptology was born. He was a member of the French Institute and took more pride in his scientific contributions than his victories. He believed that a leader must be the most educated person in the room. He spent his nights reading history, philosophy, and geography, constantly feeding a hunger for knowledge that was as vast as his ambition for territory. If there was one word that defined Napoleon's life, it was vitesse, speed. He believed that time was the only resource that could never be recovered. On the battlefield, he moved his armies twice as fast as his enemies thought possible. He stripped his soldiers of heavy tents and forced them to live off the land just to gain a few hours on the opponent. This obsession extended to his personal life. He ate his meals in less than 10 minutes, often to the horror of his guests. He worked 18 to 20 hours a day, famously saying, "I may lose a battle, but I shall never lose a minute." To Napoleon, a slow decision was worse than a wrong one. Before Napoleon, high military rank was reserved for the nobility. You had to be born a duke or a count to lead an army. Napoleon destroyed this tradition. He believed in talent above all else. He famously told his troops, "Every French soldier carries a marshal's baton in his knapsack." He promoted men based on their bravery and intelligence, regardless of their birth. His greatest generals were the sons of stable hands, tavern keepers, and coopers. This trait created a fierce loyalty among his men. They knew that under Napoleon, their future was limited only by their own courage. He turned France into a machine where the best rose to the top. Napoleon was perhaps the first modern leader to understand the power of the narrative. He was his own PR agent. He founded his own newspapers to report on his victories, often exaggerating his successes and hiding his failures. He commissioned the greatest artists of the day, like Jacques-Louis David, to paint him in heroic poses, like the famous image of him crossing the Alps on a charging horse. In reality, he crossed on a mule. He understood that to rule, he didn't just need to control the land. He needed to control the imagination of the people. He crafted his image so carefully that even today, 200 years later, the legend of Napoleon often overshadows the reality of the man. While he was a big-picture strategist, Napoleon was obsessed with the smallest details. He could tell you exactly how many pairs of shoes were in a warehouse in Poland while he was sitting in Paris. He personally reviewed the budgets of his theaters, the cleanliness of his soldiers' barracks, and the phrasing of every law in the Napoleonic Code. This trait made him a brilliant administrator, but a difficult boss. He was a micromanager centuries before the word was invented. He believed that a single loose horseshoe or a missing button could be the butterfly effect that leads to the fall of an empire. He saw everything, and his officials lived in constant fear of his detailed inspections. Napoleon was a man of science, but he was also deeply superstitious. He believed he had a star, a destiny that protected him. This fatalism gave him immense courage. He would walk through a hail of bullets at the bridge of Lodi because he believed it wasn't his time to die. However, this trait was a double-edged sword. It made him believe he was invincible. When his star began to fade during the Russian campaign, he refused to accept reality, believing that his destiny would somehow save him from the snow and the fire. He was a romantic who fell in love with his own myth, and that myth eventually led to his downfall. If you asked Napoleon at the end of his life what his greatest achievement was, he wouldn't say Austerlitz or Marengo. He would say the Code Civil. Napoleon's most enduring trait was his desire for order and structure. He replaced the chaotic, confusing laws of the old world with a clear, logical set of laws that granted religious freedom and abolished feudalism. This code is still the basis of the legal systems in over 40 countries today. He wanted to be more than a conqueror. He wanted to be the architect of a new civilization. He gave the world a blueprint for modern government, proving that his mind was as sharp at the desk as it was on the battlefield. Finally, the trait that held it all together, his iron will. Napoleon was a man who simply refused to accept the word impossible. He famously said, "Impossible is a word to be found only in the dictionary of fools." Whether he was escaping from exile on the island of Elba with a handful of men to retake an entire country, or rebuilding the French economy from bankruptcy, his willpower was a force of nature. It was this energy that inspired millions to follow him into the jaws of death. Even his enemies admitted that his presence on a battlefield was worth 40,000 men. He was a human dynamo, a man who pushed the limits of what a single human life could achieve. Napoleon died in exile on a lonely rock in the Atlantic, but his influence never died. He was a man of brilliant light and deep shadows, a conqueror who brought liberty and a tyrant who brought war. But through his 10 traits, he showed us the power of a single mind when it is fueled by math, curiosity, and an unstoppable will. Which of Napoleon's traits do you find most fascinating? Was he a hero of the Enlightenment or a warning from history? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, like this video and subscribe to discover the world in 10. Until next time, keep exploring history. Goodbye.